Love staying informed? Subscribe now and get unlimited access to local news, weather, and sports for just 99 cents a month for your first 3 months at inforum.news/join. Read every story, listen to every podcast, and download the apps that keep you informed and on the go 24 hours a day. So head to inforum.news/join right now to subscribe. What are you waiting for? Get 3 months of local news for just 99 cents a month at inforum.news/join.
Welcome to Plain Talk. We don't normally record on a Thursday, but there's a lot happening in state politics. So our guest is right now the only announced gubernatorial candidate in the state of North Dakota for the Republican nomination, although the Democrats don't. Well, I guess he is the only gubernatorial candidate because Democrats don't have one either so far. Kelly Armstrong joining the show. And before we went on, Kelly was showing us, we record this by video call, and Kelly was showing us a mug that said, "Keep calm and let the Norwegian lady handle it," a reference to your wife.
Very much so. She keeps me grounded in things that really matter when we're, family, friends, all of those different things. Well, we're going down this wild endeavor.
Maybe she should be running for governor.
I would drop out tomorrow and run her campaign if she'd have me.
Well, tell us. Obviously, it's been a whirlwind week. You first. It all began with you getting a primary challenge in the House race. But then Governor Burgum announced he's not seeking a third term. You had long expressed interest in running for that office if he didn't seek a third term. Within, I don't know, what was it, 24 hours, a little bit more of, maybe it was more than that. And I'm so tired now, I'm forgetting the timeline on everything, but it wasn't long after you got a House primary challenger. You left the House race. Now you're running for governor. Tell us, give us the behind the scenes of this week.
Well, first, the honest answer is I had encouraged Governor Burgum to run again. I think, like a lot of people, I thought he probably was going to run again. I think I think he's done a great job for North Dakota. So we, as you said, Monday morning, we got ready. We're always ready. So we always expect a primary challenge. We always expect a general challenge. We control our office that way, where we go off and go forward with that. But then after Governor Burgum announced, I was in Jamestown meeting with the president of Jamestown College, and drove home and sat around my kitchen table, the one I'm sitting at right now, and had a really long, heartfelt discussion with my wife. We had obviously talked about it. You guys had asked questions prior, and we just made the decision that given the current and dynamic change in government, North Dakota is going to need a lot of leadership moving forward, and we're going to have to build off some foundations, and we're going to have to get better at other things, and we can come back home, and we think we can fight for the citizens of North Dakota here. And so that's how we got into this race and decided to get into it. And then you both know me, when we make a decision, we go. There's not a lot of it, and there's no time for that right now. There's no time for indecision. There's no time for poll testing. There's no time for that. If you think you can help and you think you have some skill sets that might be beneficial to the citizens of North Dakota, we pulled the trigger and we executed what I think is a pretty good rollout given the amount of time we had to do it.
It's funny, Kelly, you bring up the decisiveness. Aaron and I actually talked about that this morning. Is the thing about Kelly is you don't have to worry about indecision. When you decided to do it, the video was ready and all that sort of rollout. But one of the first messages that you sent out, you announced on Tuesday afternoon that you're running for governor. By Tuesday night, you said the Republican Party has to rally around Donald Trump as the presidential nominee. It's a guy that obviously has a background that, grabbing women by the genitals and some racial stuff that he said about Haley. Last night, he said Nikki Haley's a bird brain, and said that anybody who supports Nikki Haley can't be part of the MAGA movement or whatever. My question for you is, without bringing up Joe Biden, why rally around Donald Trump? That's not the divisive politician you are, right? I know that. That's not who you are. How do we get past that if that's the person the Republican Party is rallying around.
We're in a partisan system, Chad. I was the state party chairman. I think primaries are good for the soul. I've said that. I've taken criticism on the other side, saying, Donald Trump was a president. I think he was a great president for the state of North Dakota. I know you both disagree with that. That's fine. But the other answer is everybody took their shot. I mean, he won Iowa decisively. He won New Hampshire decisively. Nikki Haley's going to campaign for 3 weeks and then lose in her home state. At the end of the day, you get your chance. But if you want to take a swing at the king, you better not miss. And the Republican Party and the Republican voters have shown overwhelmingly that Donald Trump is going to be the next nominee for president. Anything else at this point in time is just really not politically feasible. And if our ultimate goal is to win an election and beat Joe Biden, which you have to bring up Joe Biden, if you live in North Dakota and you care about ag and you care about energy and you care about regulation that's crushing our farmers and our ranchers and our energy producers, then you have to bring him up. And we have a two-party system, and Donald Trump's going to be our nominee. And every dollar we spend fighting with each other is one less dollar we get to spend on beating Joe Biden in November.
I do wish that Democrats were offering a better alternative than Joe Biden. One thing that Nikki Haley's brought up that I did think was relevant. If the goal, as you say, is to beat Joe Biden, and I agree with that, then Nikki Haley points out that Republicans lost in the 2018 midterms. They lost in the 2020 midterms. They lost, Donald Trump lost the White House, and we lost ground in 2022. And now we're seeing a lot of Republican lawmakers leaving Congress, including yourself, although you're leaving to run for governor, who are seemingly fed up with this. I mean, I don't, if the goal is beating Democrats and beating Joe Biden, do you really think that Donald Trump is the best foot forward for that?
Well, I have the simplest response to that. If you want to beat Donald Trump, the goal is to win Iowa. The goal is to win New Hampshire. The goal is to win South Carolina. She can't do any of those things. You make whatever message you want. You can talk about all of those different issues, but we are a two-party system, and the Republican Party is going to nominate Donald Trump, and that is where it is. And we get forward, we move forward, we win, we beat Joe Biden in November. I mean, you can make all of these arguments, but they're not landing. They're simply not landing, and you can't make a case unless you can show that you can win, and she can't win. I mean, you can't win in November if you can't win in Iowa in January, and you can't win in November if you can't win in New Hampshire in January, and you can't win in November if you can't win in your home state in February.
So, Kelly, one of the things Rob and I talked about yesterday is, you've been in Congress for 5 or 6 years, but to me, it doesn't feel like you ever went Washington. I mean, you're so accessible. Your family is here. Your kids go to school here in Bismarck. But a governor's race is different on your family. When you and Tin sat down and talked about this, this isn't just you running for governor. It's her becoming potentially the first lady as well.
She's going to be great at that, and however she decides to be in that role, by the way.
Yeah. So how are you preparing your family for, you've been high profile, but this is a different level of high profile to be ready for this.
And it's tough, right? I have a 16-year-old daughter and a 13-year-old son, and they're teenagers. And the sacrifice to run for office and get beat up is, if you're not willing to do that, you are in the wrong game at the wrong time. But the only hesitation I ever have to this is they've already, all three of them have sacrificed a lot, Chad. They have to hear stuff and see stuff. And nothing good is ever said on the 13th comment on social media. But the other answer is, and this is a personal thing, and it's really important to me. And I think it's important people know this. I didn't see a single one of my kids' junior high football games this year. Didn't see one. And so there's a lot of challenges and there's a lot of different things coming home. But part of the reason I'm coming home is because instead of having to be on the road 300 days a year fighting for North Dakota in that space and running into a brick wall a lot of times, right? I'm an ex-defense attorney. When you're always going to run into brick walls in federal politics, it's when you slow down that it's probably time to get out. And I wasn't ready to slow down. But if we can do this and we can go there and we can help show, because I also have that experience. I have kids in public school. We grew up in Western North Dakota. I lived in Grand Forks. I started my first business in Grand Forks. I've married an immigrant. I have a lot of really unique things that I've been wholly blessed with, but we can bring, I think, a little bit of different perspective about issues that care to every family in North Dakota around here. And I think North Dakotans understand that. I think I say, listen, I love serving the state. It's been the greatest pleasure I've ever had serving in Washington, D.C. But we think we can do a lot of good here, particularly at a time where we're going to have a huge turnover in the North Dakota legislature. We're at a crossroads. We got a Supreme Court right now that is willing to push back on federal regulation and help do some of these things. So we have to come back and be smarter and more appropriate to do it. But don't kid yourself. After we talked to my wife and I talked a little bit, we got our kids around the table and made sure they knew what was coming and made sure they were okay with it. There's some bribery going on, which I would expect from teenagers. So, but they've been really supportive.
You know, one of the things when you write about politicians, I think sometimes you get a little bit more up close look at this stuff. I remember it was right after it was the first time after getting sick with COVID that I was actually able to leave my house. I was still on an oxygen tank and stuff, carrying it with me. But my family, we always like to go down to Charlie's Diner here in Minot on Saturday mornings. And we went down there, and Senator Kevin Kramer was sitting there with his wife and his youngest son, Abel. And it was like, you know, what are you guys doing here? They were in town for a soccer tournament. You know, and you forget about that stuff. That's got to be really hard for I mean, obviously you were just saying it was hard for you. It's hard for Kevin to live that life and to be a family person, especially when you have young children.
And I don't want to the sacrifices we make to run for office and all of those things are minuscule compared to the ones a lot of other people make. But it's a sacrifice for my kid, and I miss it. I mean, you only get those years once.
Yeah.
You all know that. You're both dads.
Yeah. I wanted to talk a little bit about policy because Governor Burgum just gave a state of the state. And it was a very forceful, and I'm not saying that pejoratively. I mean, but he clearly still has a vision for the state of North Dakota. You know, he's talking about a lot of things. Eliminating the income tax obviously was one that got a lot of attention. How, if in any way, I mean, can you kind of run us through where do you agree with Governor Burgum, and maybe more importantly, where do you diverge?
Well, I think our personalities are different. I think, first of all, I think he's been a great governor for the state of North Dakota. As I said earlier, I was hoping he was going to run again and do all of these different issues. I agree with him on income tax. I've argued about that even when I was in the legislature. I'm like, why do we keep reducing it? Why it's time to pull out. I mean, it's probably time to deal with it, particularly as we are. I'm not sure. I mean, where you disagree on policy and all of those different issues, I will say, that we have to figure out how to make sure government continues to be more efficient. And I think more at time now than anywhere in North Dakota that, you know, we've grown so much. And part of that was the oil boom. I grew up legislatively in the oil boom. When you have a town like Watford City that is 1,600 people and it goes to 16,000 people, you can do some things on roads and infrastructure and all of those things. But you can do it quickly, which you needed, or you can do it as efficiently as possible, but you usually can't do both. But at the same time, we have to continue to figure out how to make it better, more efficient. And I think one thing where I agree with Governor Burgum, how we go about it may be different just because of our relationships, is how do you ensure that everybody working for state government is doing it so the effective thing you are going for is getting back to the citizens of North Dakota. The bureaucracy and the inefficiency of government when it gets bigger exists everywhere. I've watched it firsthand for 5 years in Washington, but we're not immune to it here, particularly with the growth we have. So one of the things I will do, and I think any new governor should do, is look at every state agency, look at their core missions, see where you can do better, see what you need, see what you don't need, and figure out a way how you can do that. And the reason it's important is if you increase those efficiencies, we talk about this stuff like it's a ledger on a line. But if you can get somebody 6% more of what they're paying in state, local, federal taxes back to them, that's a vacation, or it's a college fund, or it's the ability to buy a new pair of shoes for a basketball kid who's in 4th grade, or all of those things. We don't just look at it like that. You have to look at it in a way in which you can make government work for people instead of cause them problems.
I wanted just one quick follow-up. You said that yours and Governor Burgum, you have different personalities. Expand on that.
Well, I mean, I've had the ability to work with him. I've had the ability to work with him in the legislature. He's been a great partner, but I mean, he's one of the smartest people, if not in North Dakota, in the entire country. But I mean, I grew up in smaller business, and I grew up in trial, and I grew up doing those things, and a baseball coach. And, you know, I've served in the legislature, so I have a very good approach, I think a good approach to how the governor or the governor's office and the legislature should work. But I've had tremendous amount of respect for Governor Burgum, Governor Dalrymple, Senator Hoeven, and I don't think anybody thinks any of us have the same personality. And you're going to bring the traits and life experiences you've had into that office.
Kelly, the legislature has changed a lot since you were there. 5 or 6 years ago. You've got the different sort of factions. It's obviously a far more Republican legislature than even, again, you were 5 or 6 years ago. How would you handle those relationships? How would you bring the sort of factions together behind an Governor Armstrong sort of policy agenda? What does that strategy look like? Because I think it's the one place where Governor Burgum struggled quite a bit, was building that relationship with the legislature.
Call him into your office. Have him over. I believe this. Have him over to dinner. Talk to him. Don't make it personal. I've tried really hard in D.C. not to make it personal. I'm going to try really hard every day not to make it personal. Lawyers get a bad rap, and rightfully so a lot of times. But the one thing you learn when you're fighting for people who don't have anybody else fighting for them in a small town is you spend a lot of time with people you fight with, whether it's prosecutors or chief of police or sheriffs or deputies, judges more often than not. And I've always been proud of the fact that I get to maintain, I can fight with anybody professionally and try and keep the personalities out of it. Because every one of those people got elected by a district. Every single person got elected by one of the districts in North Dakota. And they have every right to legislate and every right to advocate on their behalf. And the solution to that, if you don't like it, is back home. The governor is not in charge of a District 39 legislator. For the governors I worked with, they were never my boss. And I never approached it like that. I approached them as a partner in figuring out how we can do things like the surge bill and how we can deal with issues and make sure we bring stuff back to North Dakota.
Chad stole my question, unfortunately, because that was one thing that I agree with him that I think one of the weaknesses of Governor Burgum, who I agree overall was a great governor, was an at times acrimonious relationship with the legislature, and in some ways, the friction between the branches is normal. You are partners, as you said. The legislature doesn't work for the governor, and so you expect. There were some lawsuits and things like that. That stuff doesn't bother me. I think that's normal. Both sides are concerned about the limits of the other side's power, things like that. But it did seem at times, and I'm thinking specifically of like his gubernatorial campaign in 2016, where he was running against the good old boys and kind of made the legislature the enemy. And I always wondered if maybe he regretted that later on, when maybe painting with such a broad brush, he won himself some enemy. I feel like that goes to your point about don't make it personal. I felt like at times he kind of made it personal.
I think, but by the way, I'll have fights with the legislature. I think Governor Schafer had fights with the legislature. Governor Hoeven had fights with the legislature. Even Governor Dalrymple, who's maybe one of the 5 nicest people I have met in my entire time in politics anywhere, had fights with the legislature. I think some of how when Governor Burgum came into office, a lot of this is the same reason we get to do a podcast now versus a radio interview. I think a lot of it gets, hyped up a little more than it is. He had they've accomplished a lot of things and a lot of really good things and a lot of really unique things. And you don't get to do that if you don't have a relationship and an ability to get legislation moved through the chambers. So I think, you can have some of those conversations and I fully want to sit down and pick Governor Burgum's brain about what he thinks works, what doesn't work, and what he sees moving forward. But I also think he's got a pretty good record to stand on.
Kelly, from your perspective, what does this campaign look like? If Tammy Miller gets in, if Tom Campbell gets in, if others get in, do you expect it to be really sharp? Do you expect it to be negative? Do you expect it to end at the convention? What's your sort of strategy? Because this is a unique circumstance. If an open governor seat doesn't happen very often, and you're going to have a bunch of people who are fighting for it and want really it badly, potentially the governors, lieutenant governors in this thing, potentially Donald Trump ends up playing in this thing. We don't know. He paid in a treasurer's race. But what is your sort of strategy to navigate this is sort of a new thing to have an open governor's race like this?
Well, my hope is that everybody runs on what they have, what their vision is, what their accomplishments are, what they think they can bring back to the state to serve the people in North Dakota. That's my hope. But I will also tell you that I've been around now in politics for about a decade. And and I know how politics work. I know how campaigns work. And that's why, not only do I mean, I'm pretty proud of the fact that I'll show up anywhere. I'll call anybody. I'll talk to anybody. I will answer questions. I think you guys know I don't poll test something before I give you an answer. I try and learn about it and react to it in what I think is a reasonable, thoughtful manner. But I also have a really good team, and I have people that I trust exceptionally that have been with me since the beginning of my time in here. And just to be honest, Chad, if we're going to, whatever road this campaign goes, we're going to be ready. And we're going to be ready to do it, because I also think that, I mean, you walk into a room and you ask somebody about how all of this stuff.
Sorry, we had a little break in the audio there. Congressman Armstrong's connection dropped for a moment, but we're back now. So continuing the recording. Go ahead, Kelly. Finish your thought.
I think just the answer to that is there's never a win at all costs. You have to be able to go home and look in the mirror every single night when you do this. But North Dakota is going to need leadership over the next 4 years. And if you're not going to fight for the job, how are you going to fight for the people when you're in the job? So we're going to take this campaign. We're going to run it. We're going to have discipline. We're going to get out there. But we're also going to go as many places as we can. I think the one unique thing is I'm not giving up on my old job while I'm running for governor. We have a 2-vote majority in the House. I'm on judiciary. We have an impeachment inquiry coming. We have all of those different things, and I will continue to do those things as we continue to move further, which will be difficult. I'll learn how to survive on very little sleep, but outside of that, we're going to continue to move forward.
One thing that I think Governor Burgum was challenged with was the focus in the last couple of legislative sessions on, I don't know if you want to call them culture war issues, social issues, but things like books, things like pronouns, things like transgender. Governor Burgum, I think overall, was very resistant to a lot of that stuff, vetoed a lot of it. He also signed some of it. What's your approach to those sorts of issues?
The same one I always have on every issue, whether it's a hot button issue or it's a mundane issue. First of all, is it a problem? Second of all, is the solution creating unintended consequences that you don't know about? Third of all, is it the state government's role or is it local control? And there's a lot of these different issues, and there are ones where the state needs to step in. And we have North Dakota High School Athletics Association. We have a lot of those issues. But there are also a lot of issues. I spent a lot of time in the legislature, and I think you guys both know this as well. There are a lot of people that like local control until they don't like how locals do things. It's the same
I would say there's
including maybe some people on this call right now.
Yeah, and by the way, we deal with it, and I learned that. I served in my first session in the state legislature, and if I can tell you anything about votes I regret, some of them are just completely non-controversial stuff. But as you're getting your fitting and where you really view how the state government should interact with Dickinson or Stark County and the places I represented. So, I mean, one of the reasons I like Governor Burgum on the campaign stage for president is he was one of the few people talking about how the expansion of the federal government is not going to solve problems. They have never been good at what they touch. And the expansion of the state government is not going to solve problems if it is something that can be better handled locally. So, I mean, you're going to have culture war issues. You're going to have these issues, and people care deeply about them. But you have to overall look at it and say, all right, is this something that should be handled in a local school board? Is this something that should be handled in a local city commission? Or is this something the state needs to engage in and get involved in? And then I think the other side of that is how much we're going to pick fights with the federal government, which I think I'm uniquely qualified to help do.
So, Kelly, you've been in this race for about 48 hours. So obviously you've been thinking about who your running mate will be. But I mean, obviously that's one of the things that's going to happen in the next several months. What are you going to be looking for in terms of a running mate? Obviously, I don't think you actually know who your running mate is going to be. Unless you want to tell us, that would break some news.
I do not. And
okay.
We have had, we have talked, the sum total of that talk has been, we are going to have to put a group of people together that start thinking about who a running mate will be. First, simple answer. If I die in a car wreck between Bismarck and Fargo, that person's going to become the governor. That is the first and most important metric that exists. Second of all,
that's also very grim, but yeah, no, I get it.
But I mean, I used to talk to people about, writing wills and estates and living wills and all of those different things. Those are tough conversations to have, but you have to prepare and you have to be ready. And for those things, the second thing is, I need to trust them. I need to trust their political judgment, and I need to trust their character. And then after that, everything else comes secondary based on, ways in which it works. I mean, those are the three things I look for in anybody I surround myself with, and that's why I think we have the ability to do this well, is because I've been blessed with some of the best friends and family and staff that you could have in this business.
Do you feel like, and again, I mean, we're in such an unusual political time. I mean, people can call for unity. I'm not sure unity is achievable right now, but how do you, I've always viewed you as somebody who has sort of navigated this era very well. And I don't mean that as a criticism, because I think sometimes people navigate it by being not very visible or being very quiet or trying to fly under the radar. I don't perceive you as doing those things. You're very glib. You're very, you're quick to give an answer. You're very transparent. You don't say no to interviews. Certainly you don't say no to any of my interview requests. So, I mean, how have you accomplished that? I mean, how have you done that, sort of navigated these very divided times in a way that I think leaves you not that disliked by, and I say that President Trump President Trump has called for you to be primaried. We have seen some people upset with your vote on codifying same-sex marriage, your vote on censuring Adam Schiff. So, I mean, there's been some of it out there, but for the most part, I feel like you've done a pretty good job.
Well, I appreciate that. I think the answer is I take votes. I'll defend the reasoning behind my vote. I understand that people aren't agree with me, but I just went through an unbelievably messy speakers fight in the House and everything. I think unity is a great buzzword, but you don't need unity to be effective. I mean, the one thing about what I've learned about the Republican conference, we're not family. I have family. Like, we are people that are elected from different parts of the country trying to advance a Republican agenda or conservative agenda. And I learned a lot about this in the state party role as chairman, right? I couldn't get elected in district. When I came from District 36 as a Republican rural senator, I need to help. I want to elect Republicans who fit their district and can work towards those issues. I mean, being a Republican in downtown Fargo is a lot different than being a Republican in rural Western North Dakota. And I've always tried to explain that to both sides of the equation. And, you learn a lot about that in Congress, because my answer to the question is, well, I understand that this is a Democrat that we get to work with. I use Colin Peterson as an example, who I got to know very well. But his first vote was going to be for Speaker Pelosi for Speaker. So I didn't really care what his second and third vote were going to be. And we're a lot better off when we're fighting against policies that are bad, particularly from this administration, than we are fighting with each other.
I wanted to, because we only have a few minutes left, but I wanted to ask you specifically about, how did you feel when, the former president of the United States, somebody you've now endorsed for president, called for you to be primaried? What were you thinking at that point? How did you react to it?
Hey, I was thinking that I'm not going to vote for a bill or not vote for a resolution that violates 3 different clauses of the U.S. Constitution.
And by the way, we're talking about the censure of Adam Schiff, just to be clear about what that.
Yeah, by the way, I voted to censure Adam Schiff.
Right, that's right. The first censure. You did vote for the second one.
I spent 3.5 months in Schiff's secret bunker as his staff and him were selectively leaking things to the press, but holding hearings in a classified setting about non-classified issues. I watched him lie on TV when I know it's a lie, and I can't talk about it because I'm in a classified setting. I have no problem censoring Adam Schiff. What I do have a problem with, and I hope at least people respect this, even if they're angry with me, it violated 3 clauses of the U.S. Constitution. We can't have one member of Congress fining somebody $16 million. We can't do a change in pay during the course. There's no due process to that extensive set of those things. And so when Donald Trump said that, I said, if he wants to talk to me about the vote, I would love to have a conversation about it. And it wasn't just me. There were other members. Thomas Massey is one of them. I mean, guys that I have a lot of respect for. And one of the reasons I do is because we're going to take a tough vote if that's where we're at.
Does it bother you endorsing somebody for president who doesn't understand the constitutional argument against that first censure vote?
No, we're a party. Like you said, everybody has ideas. There are 1,000 Republicans. There are donors. There are all of these different issues that have decided that for whatever reason, they're going to tell the people of the United States who the Republican candidate should be. Guess what? They're not getting there. Again, We have a two-party system. We have a nominating process. They have a nominating process. Every single one of those arguments has not landed. It won't land again in South Carolina. And at the end of this process, which I hope comes as soon as possible, we unite around whoever our Republican candidate, who's going to be Donald Trump, and we go try and beat Joe Biden.
Kelly, I have a 3-part question to end this with. Are you ready?
Yeah.
1, do you think you're going to be the first Mets fan to ever run for the governor of North Dakota? 2, will you continue to come on this podcast to talk about baseball? And 3, will you continue to play Immaculate Grid with Rob and I when you have time?
1, I'm the first person who will admit he's a Mets fan. Do that. 2, I would love to talk about baseball as much as possible. And 3, I will get back into Immaculate Grid after we get through this first week.
Well, that's good to hear. That you're going to make time for us, because you're going to be busy trying to serve in Congress and trying to run for governor at the same time. And it's by the way, I mean, the column I wrote yesterday, it is a short timeline. For this, I mean, because this is, I mean, what we're in right now is the Republican primary. There's no Democratic candidate yet. That'll be something for the general election after June. But I think it's 71 days now to the convention. It's 100 and some odd days to June, the June 11th primary. I'm forgetting now how many numbers. I did the math yesterday. I'm not going to do it again in my head. So it's a short timeline. But anyway, Kelly, thank you so much for coming on. Appreciate it. Looking forward to covering this race.
Thanks, guys.
Did you know Forum Communications Company has a robust podcast library? At inforum.com/podcasts, we have everything from politics, sports, true crime, outdoor adventure, and more. Visit inforum.com/podcasts and explore them all today.